Brachos, Daf Brachos through Lamed Daled. On Daf Brachos, the Gemara brings the story of a ger Ammoni, a ger from the nation of Ammon, who wanted to marry a Jewish woman. Halachos, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Gamliel said, Pasuk says you're not allowed to. Lo yavo Ammoni moavi b'kal Hashem. Rabbi Yeshua says that's true, but Sancheirav mixed up all the nations. Bilbel kol ha'umos. We paskin like Rabbi Yeshua. Rambam paskins that none of the nations that are here today are the same nations that we read about in the time of the Torah. He gives examples of the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians are not the same Egyptians, the Edomim are not the same Edomim. Post Sancheirav, none of these nations apply. None of the rules apply. So anyone that you meet from these nations, you follow Rov, and Rov says he's not from one of these nations. That's how most poskim paskin. However, the Sefer Yereim says, with Edom in particular, he disagrees with Rambam. In Edom in particular, he's not sure that we assume that Edom was Nisbal by Sancheirav. Also, he brings Chazal and other arguments that Edom is still Edom we have today. Rome today is still the same Edom, a biblical Edom. Therefore, he has a suffix whether with Edom specifically you're allowed to accept Gerim, whether those Gerim can marry Jewish women until 3 generations. Yaakov Emden has a tshuva. He talks about a Ger from Italy. He's not sure if he can marry a Jewish woman because Italy is Rome. Rome is Edom according to Chazal and according to their traditions. Also, he says, so he's Mesupik. Suffix Shaltari says you should avoid marrying. He should try to marry Gyaris. You should avoid marrying a Jewish woman until 3 generations. In the course of the extended saga of the argument between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua and the Chachamim about who is going to be in charge, Rabbi Yeshua argued eventually that Rabbi Gamliel should be reinstated. He said, Mazeh ben Mazeh Yazeh, the person who sprinkles the Efer Para, the son of someone who does it, he should be the one to do it. Someone else who does not have this ancestral tradition should not be the one to do the Hazah. He shouldn't tell him that you can serve and I should serve. This is brought by the Poskim, the Rambam. There are other Makaras for this, but this is a source for the din that positions in general. The Rambam says not just the monarchy, but Kol Asraros, all positions, V'chol HaMinuyim, all positions of authority are hereditary. A person has it, his son inherits it also. As long as he's suitable, as long as he fills his father's shoes, b'chachmo v'yira, in wisdom and in Yira Shemayim. If he only has Yira, that's tolerable, he says. If he doesn't have Yira, then that's not acceptable. If he's missing Chachma, we can teach him the Chachma. The Gemara talks about what to do with Rabbi ben Azariah after they wanted to reinstate Rabbi Gamliel. So it says that what should we do? Should we fire him? Should we remove him from the position? We can't do that. Malin b'kodesh ve'in maridin. This is brought in Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah brings this in Shulchan Aruch that anytime someone is accepted by the community, by the kahal, no one can depose him, no one can replace him, even if he's greater and more suitable, because Malin b'kodesh ve'in maridin. That's why he says they didn't even remove Rabbi Gamliel in the previous Daf and Chav Zayin. They didn't even remove Rabbi Gamliel until it happened 3 times that he behaved problematically toward Yeshua. Once, they wouldn't remove him, because once someone has a position and he was accepted by the Kahal, there's a very high bar before you can remove him. The Gemara talks about Musaf. Musaf we paskin is Vizmana is the entire day. However, really you shouldn't daven after 7 hours. If you do, you're called a Poshea, but you're still Yotzei B'diavad. The Gemara has a debate about what you do if it's already Zman Mincha and you still haven't daven Musaf. Which should you daven first? We paskin halacha, the Gemara says, Mincha first and afterward Musaf. There's a debate among the Rishonim, 2 days in Shulchan Aruch, whether that applies always. Anytime there's man, it's already Zman Mincha and it's Man Musaf, you should always do Mincha first. But on Kippur, some poskim warn that if you've already daven Shachris, it's already past Chatzot, it's already past Mincha Gedola. At this point, you have to daven Mincha before Musaf. Other poskim say no, it's only in a specific case where you need to daven Mincha right away because you want to do something that you're not allowed to do before you daven Mincha, like a Suda Gedola, we'll discuss soon. Then you have to daven Mincha first. But normally, since his Madav Mincha is later, Mincha Ketana or near Dimdu Mechama, if you want to daven Mincha later, Bisman, you can daven Musaf now. It's only in the specific case where you need to daven Mincha now, then you daven Mincha before Musaf. Gemara talks about eating before Musaf. We paskin, you're allowed to eat before Musaf. You're allowed to taste something, a small amount of food before Musaf, either peiros, fruit, or even bread, a small amount of bread. You can't have a full suda, but you can have a small amount of food before Musaf, but you make Kiddush, according to most poskim. The Gemara brings a halacha, you're not allowed to daven ahead of the tzibur. You're not allowed to be makdim tfilas or tfilas at tzibur. If you're in shul and they're davening and you want to get it earlier, you can't just daven earlier. Not just that you missed tefillah b'tzibur, but there's an actual isser in davening ahead of the tzibur. Unless you're going to miss this man, if the tzibur is going so slowly they're going to miss man tefillah, then you can daven earlier. Then Without that, you should not be parish from tzibur. You should daven wherever they're davening, the piyutim, whatever they do, you should do. You should not be parish from tzibur, even if you want to learn Torah. It's not a good enough reason. It's not appropriate to daven ahead of the tzibur. Why not? Mishnah Berurah brings from the Archas Chaim, because you're insulting the tzibur by saying, I want to daven at my speed, I don't care what the tzibur is doing. That's insulting to the tzibur. Even if you have a good reason, you want to learn Torah, you have a share, not a good enough reason. As long as you're not going to miss man tefillah, you shouldn't daven ahead of the tzibur. So musaf, we said you're allowed to eat before musaf, a small amount. Mincha, the Gemara says, asur la'adam shegitam klum, you're not allowed to eat anything, even te'ima, before mincha. What does that actually mean? What are you not allowed to eat? So there are numerous deos in the Rishonim, numerous different opinions about how strict we are about this halacha. The Shulchan Aruch first brings a very strict opinion. You can't eat even Suda Ketana, even Samach Mincha Gedola, even once it's, even Mincha Gedola is 6 hours and a half hour into the day, 6.5 hours into the day. Samach Mincha Gedola would mean even a half hour before that. From Chatzos, basically, you can't eat even a Suda Ketana. Then the Ramah brings, there are more lenient opinions, or other opinions that say that Suda Ketana is always mutter, the prohibition is only Suda Gedola. Suda Gedola means a really big meal, like a wedding meal or a bris meal, not just a regular Suda Shabbos. It's not called Suda Gedola, only a major party. Some say that Mincha Gedola is always mutter, the Surim are even Suda Ketana, but only Samach Mincha Ketana. When it's still Mincha Gedola, it's always mutter. Some say that Suda Ketana, Samach Mincha Ketana is mutter, and Suda Gedola, Samach Mincha Gedola is mutter. So the Ramah says the reason we're makel, the Ramah says we're makel like this, that you can eat a Suda Gedola, even a Suda Gedola when it's still only Mincha Gedola until Mincha Ketana. And even when it's Mincha Ketana, 9.5 hours into the day, even then, you're still allowed to eat Suda Ketana. Why are we so lenient? So the Ramah says because we're so mech on the idea that there's Kor in the basic Knesset, the Shamash comes around, they actually knock on people's doors, they call everyone to shul, the whole Isser here is we're afraid you'll forget to daven Mincha, somebody will knock on your door and remind you, so there's no concern. Suda Gedola, you should be machmer, even Samach Mincha Gedola. Suda Ketana, we're not so worried because we're relying on the Kriyas Shamash. But the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Derech HaChaim, we're talking about a person who is going to stop as soon as the Shamash comes. If he's not going to stop, he's going to keep on eating, then he can't rely on the Kriyas Shamash. The problem is the later posts can say, we don't really have the Kriyas Shamash, nobody knocks on your door today to remind you about Mincha. Rov Makomos, Aruch HaShulchan says, we don't do this, yet people are lenient. They eat an ordinary supper before Mincha sometimes. Mincha can be late in the summer or an Erev Shabbos, people eat Suda Shlishis before Mincha. So why are we so lenient? So some posts can say that once Mincha Gedola comes, once Mincha Ketana comes, even Suda Ketana is Aser. And we don't have the Kriyas Basic Knesses. Aruch HaShulchan tries to miyashiv the Mincha Olam. He gives various types of aterim. He says if you have a Zman Kavua, a set time for Mincha, where the Tzibur davens at a normal time, we're not afraid you're going to forget. Yonachanami says someone who typically davens at his own time, different times of the day, doesn't daven with a minyan is Aser, but someone who has a set minyan, then he's not going to forget it. I'm not sure if that would apply to someone who davens at a different minyan whenever he feels like it. There are 10 minyanim in town. He doesn't have a set time he davens on Shabbos. A lot of different minyanim. I'm not sure if that would apply. He has other heterim there to be miyashiv the minhag is to be fairly lenient about this. Most people don't think twice about eating supper before Mincha, but it's not so clear from the Shulchan Aruch why we do that. The Ramah says that the heter is only because we have the Kriyas Shamash to the basic Knesses. The Gemara brings the tefillah of Rabbi Nechuniah ben Akana. The Mishnah brings it pretty briefly. It just says when he entered the Beis Medrash, when he left the Beis Medrash, he would recite brief tefillahs. That when he entered, he doesn't want a takala. He hopes that a problem, an error, a stumbling block shouldn't occur because of his learning. When he leaves, he thanks Hashem for his portion of being a Talmid Chacham, of learning Torah. The poskim say it's not limited to the Beis Medrash. A person learns by himself. The same halacha applies. Mishnah Berurah brings that Rizal. He would say it in the morning. Every morning, then he would say, Ki Hashem yitin chacham, b'piv dasusvuna, gal einai, v'abitin aflows mitarasecha. Rambam says these two tefillos are chova. Mishnah Berurah brings the Rambam in Pirush Mishnah says that these tefillos are obligatory. Many people don't say them. I don't always say them. I wasn't brought up to always say them, but Mishnah Berurah brings the Rambam says it's an obligation. You must say them. They're not a strict Shemona Esrei. You can sit down. You can stand up. You don't have to turn to the Mizrach or Marav or any other angle, but it's a chova. You should say them. And again, Mishnah Berurah brings from Magen Avram, even people who are learning by themselves should say it, if they learn all day, they should say it at the end of the day, that when they finish learning, they should say the tefillah, thanking Hashem for their schus in learning Torah. Gemara on Daf Chavtes really starts on Daf Chavtes, but Gemara on Daf Chavtes brings different versions of Shemona Esrei, discusses whether you say the full Shemona Esrei, whether you say Me'ain Shemona Esrei. We paskin like basically Rabbi Akiva Shita, that generally a person should say the full Shemona Esrei. Later the Gemara brings Layet Abaye. On Daf Chavtes the Gemara says Abaye cursed. Abaye vituperated, those who rely on the Me'ain Shmoneh Esrei, those who rely on the abbreviated Shmoneh Esrei. Really, a person should say the full Shmoneh Esrei. But in certain cases, we paskin in certain cases, b'shas tzchak, that if you're tarud and you're afraid people are going to disturb you and you don't have time for a full Shmoneh Esrei, you can rely on this idea of Me'ain Shmoneh Esrei, of abridging Shmoneh Esrei and saying a much shorter version. That's the version we called Havinenu. You say a phrase corresponding to each bracha. We don't say the full Shmoneh Esrei. You can say Havinenu any time of the year, except for Motzei Shabbos and Motzei Yom Tovim because of Havdalah. Havdalah must be said in Chanin Hadas. The Gemara discusses why you can't say it separately. But you cannot say Havinenu on these two times on Motzei Shabbos and Motzei Yom Tov. Also in Motzei Shomer in the winter we have to say the same Talamat Levracha. Again, that has to be said in the regular Shmoneh Esrei. So in that season you cannot say Havinenu. So again, we don't say Havinenu normally. Shulchan Aruch says you say it b'shas tzchak. I've rarely heard of it being said, but it is there in the Shulchan Aruch that we say it b'shas tzchak. Gemara talks about what to do if you forget to say Geshem, if you forget to mention Dvuras Geshamim in the second bracha in Atar Gibar. So it says that's Ma'akev, we're Machzirino, so you have to daven again. She'ela, asking for Geshem, saying the same Talamat Levracha, you're supposed to say that in Brachos Hashanim, in Barech Aleinu. Ein Machzirino, so even though it's also Ma'akev, Ein Machzirino, because since it's a She'ela, Bakasha, a request, you can say it in Shemay Tefillah. Havdalah also in Chanin Hadas, Ein Machzirino, so but you don't go back because you can say it later, Halachos. The Gemara then says that this idea that you can repeat, you can make up the She'elas Ksham in Shemay Tefillah. It depends. If you remembered before Shemay Tefillah, you say it in Shemay Tefillah. If you don't remember till after you finish Makalenu, then it's a problem because you didn't say it either in Barech Aleinu or in Shmakalenu. What do you do if you're already past Shemay Tefillah? You're still in the middle of Shmoneh Esrei. It's Machlokes Rishonim. Tosfos says you just go back to Shemay Tefillah, but we paskin, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, we paskin that you go back to Brachos Hashanim. Now once you pass Shmakalenu is if you haven't gotten there yet. Once you pass Shmakalenu, but you're still down in Shmoneh Esrei, you go back to the Barech Aleinu to the Berachos Hashanim. If you're Akar Raglav, if you already finished Shmoneh Esrei, the Gemara is later going to discuss what's called finishing Shmoneh Esrei. But if you finish Shmoneh Esrei, then you have to go back to the beginning of davening, L'Kuli Alma, and not Shemay Tefillah, not Barech Aleinu, all the way back. You daven the whole Shmoneh Esrei again. Similar, one other halacha the Shulchan Aruch says is that if you remember after you finish Shemay Tefillah, you just said Baruch Atah Hashem Shemay Tefillah, but before you started Ritzei, the Shulchan Aruch says you say it right there. You say the same Talamat Levracha before Ritzei, and then just proceed into Ritzei. Yalav Yava, the Gemara talks about not mentioning Rosh Chodesh in the bracha of Ritzei. You go back to Ritzei throughout the rest of Shmoneh Esrei and Modim and Sim Shalom. You go back to Ritzei. If you finish Shmoneh Esrei, you have to daven the whole davening again, except for Marav. We'll discuss later. The other tefillas, you have to go back and daven the whole davening again. That's only if you're Akar Raglav. If you're not Akar Raglav, then you just go back to Ritzei. Not Akar Raglav is only if you actually are still in the middle of davening, even if you finish the brachas. But if you're Ragulamer Tachnunim, if you say Tachnunim like Elokai Nitzar or other Tachnunim after Shmoneh Esrei, and you're still doing that, or you're about to do that, you say it all the time, then you're still considered a middle of Shmoneh Esrei if you aren't Akar Raglav. But if you're done, if you reach right before the point at which you're Akar Raglav, you said Yul Ratzon Refi, the last thing you said, and now you're ready to be Akar Raglav. Even if you weren't Akar Raglav, then you're done, you're finished, and you have to go back to the beginning of Shmoneh Esrei. Again, Yalav Yavo, if just like we said before with the same Talamat Levracha, if you finish Ritzei, but you haven't started Modim, you say it right there. If you're in the middle of one of the later brachas, you go back to Ritzei and you say it, and you say Ritzei again. If you finish down in Shmoneh Esrei, you down the whole Shmoneh Esrei again. The Gemara talks about davening imdim du mechama, davening mincha as the sun is setting. In Marava and Eretz Yisrael, they were again very critical. The same language, layet Marava. They sharply criticized those who daven mincha that late. Why? It might be a nice time to daven, but there's a concern, a pragmatic concern. Don't mitrafa le shaita. You might miss it. You might get. You might miss this man, and you'll daven too late after the sun is already set. Mishnah Berurah talks about when he talks about this man mincha, about davening after shkia, a few minutes after shkia. The Mishnah Berurah brings different opinions. And then he says all that is b'diavad and b'shasad chak gadol. When you're really stuck and it's a real, when you really have no solution, it's really b'diavad. Then you can rely on some opinions that allow davening at least a few minutes after mincha. He says l'chatchila, certainly a person should not daven mincha after shkia. A person should be lizar ma'od, should be very careful. Certainly not to daven after tzeis. And look what the Gemara says: if someone who davens even imdim du mechama, they already vituperated him. They say layet a person should be very careful. We know there are some communities, some of the Hasidim are more lenient about this, but the Mishnah Berurah is very strict. The person should daven mincha certainly before shkia, and certainly before Tzeis HaKachav. The Gemara then talks about Tefillah Ketzara. Tefillah Ketzara is not the same as having Neinu. Tefillah Ketzara is an even shorter version of Shmoneh Esrei. You don't have all the phrases for all the brachas. You just say one very brief phrase, asking Hashem to please help you. There are different nuschos. We pass in Acherim Omrim. The version is Tzarchei Amcha Yisrael Merubin. There's many things we need. Daitim Kitzara. We don't know how to ask for them. Please Hashem, give us what we need. A much shorter version even than the Havinenu. That's how we pass in. If a person is Makom Sakani, he really can't do anything else. The Gemara says, later on Daf Laban, the Gemara says, what's the difference between Havinenu and Tefillah Tzara? So again, according to some opinions, you can daven Havinenu whenever you want, and Tefillah Tzara only Sakani, even would be done, and we only do it B'Shas, we only do even Havinenu B'Shas Chak, but the Gemara says the difference is in the structure of the Tefillah, that Havinenu needs the first 3 brachos, the final 3 brachos, and it's just a summary of the intermediate brachos, the bakashas, the requests. But you're really Yotzi Tefillah because it has that structure. When you get home, you're Yotzi Tefillah, you don't have to daven again. The Gemara says Tefillah Tzara is not really Tefillah, it has no real rules. It doesn't need the Gimel Kamaisa, it doesn't need the Gimel Basraisa. When you get home, you have to daven again. Havinenu you need to stand up, just like Shemona Esrei. Tefillah Tzara is Bein Mu'umad, Bein Mahalech, when you're walking. And Tefillah Tzara has fewer rules. You're not really Yotzi Shemona Esrei, but they're fairly lenient about it. Havinenu is stricter and is more like a real Tefillah. Gemara Daf Lamed says, Gemara talks about Tefillah Sederach. The Gemara starts discussing on Daf Chaftes, on Lamed, the Gemara continues Tefillah Sederach. It says the nusach that we know, we ask Hashem that He should please take us on our journey peacefully. The Gemara emphasizes, Abaya says, we have to say it B'Lashon Rabbim, not Shetolicheni, but Shetolichenu. Magen Avram says that even if you're the only one traveling, you're on a trip by yourself, it still makes sense to say it B'Lashon Rabbim, because someone, somewhere in the world, there's someone who's traveling also, and you can say us, me, and whoever else out there who is traveling. Gemara brings different opinions about whether you should stand up or not. So we paskin that ideally you should stand. In Efshar, you should stand. You should stop traveling. You should stand. But if you're riding on an animal, you don't have to get down. And we also paskin that if it's going to disturb you to stop, if you're in a rush or if some other reason it's distracting to stop, you don't have to stop. That's why riding also you don't have to stop, because getting off your animal, dismounting and remounting is gonna distract you and make you stressed and tarud. Therefore, you can stay on. Really staying on is not ideal because because you should stand l'chatchila, and you should also stop the behemoth if you can, even if you're not going to get off. But you should also halt the animal because rachav k'mahalach, riding is like you're walking. So ideally you should get off if you can. If it's difficult and you're going to be distracted, you should at least stop the behemoth if possible. Same thing, wagon. The Mishnah Berurah says. You don't have to get down because that would be a terda, but you should ideally at least stop the wagon if you can. Shuas Van Hagos, or Ari Lebowitz brings a Shuas Van Hagos who says that many Gedolim are very strict about this. They would ask, Rav Sternbuch says he would ask to stop the car so we could get out and stand, l'chatchila, assuming he could, and it's not going to cause terda. That's the ideal way to do it. The Achronim debate whether you can hear Shema Tefillah from someone else, whether one person can say it for someone else, different poskim. Everyone seems to agree that Mikra Din is probably okay. L'chatchila, some poskim say it's better not to do it like that. The Gemara says ad parsa, Tefillah Sederach can be said ad parsa. There are different shittas in the Rishonim. Some say that it needs to be said within the first parsa of the trip. Rashi says only within the first parsa. Other Rishonim say that it means that the entire trip has to be at least a parsa. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins that we only say it for a trip that's at least a parsa. Less than a parsa, you don't say it. Well, you don't say a bracha. You can say it without the Shem Malchus, but you don't say the full bracha. You should do like Rashi, and you should say it within the first parsa. But b'diavad, if you miss the first parsa, you can say it as long as you're not yet within a parsa of your final destination. You say Tefillah Sederach whether you're walking on foot, or on land, or on sea, or on a train. The Mishnah Berurah says the same thing. And since the train goes fast, then you're going to pass the first parsa pretty quickly. So be careful, display alacrity, and say it quickly to try to be choshish for Rashi, and say it in the first parsa. But b'diavad, again, as long as you're within a parsa of your final destination, that's okay. And once we talk about trains, the post can talk about airplanes, many different shitas on Tefillah Sederach on an airplane, when you say it, how you say it, different opinions, but the general minhag is that you do. They discuss when it's taxiing, when it's taking off, but there are different opinions about saying Tefillah Sederach on an airplane. Gemara talks about someone riding on a donkey. L'chatchila, you should, again, the Mishnah said back on Chavches, l'chatchila, you should descend. If you can't, you should at least turn toward Yerushalayim. If you get off, you face Yerushalayim. If you're on the donkey, you should at least turn your face toward Eretz Yisrael, toward Yerushalayim. If you can't, you should mechaven libo to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. You should concentrate and think about the Kodesh HaKadoshim. You do whatever you can. You do the most you can. The Gemara says that if someone doesn't know what direction it is, he doesn't have his compass, he's not sure. Happens to a lot of us, even in city people, even indoors. If you don't know, again, you're just mechaven libo toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara gives a series of things. If you're in Chutz La'aretz, you're mechaven toward Eretz Yisrael. If you're in Eretz Yisrael, you're mechaven toward Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, you're mechaven toward the Beis HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash, you're mechaven toward the Kodesh HaKadoshim. In the Kodesh HaKadoshim, toward the Kaparis, and so on. Poskim say, the Ramah says that we, Europeans in Ashkenaz and so on, we are to the west of Eretz Yisrael, therefore we face east toward Eretz Yisrael, and that's what we do. We face east. The problem is that there are many countries in which Jews live outside of Ashkenaz and Sarfas, outside France and Germany, where Yerushalayim is not to the east, Eretz Yisrael is not to the east. Aruch HaShulchan brings that those countries, the Rishonim of Ashkenaz in France and Germany, were west of Eretz Yisrael. However, he says the Ramah is already in Poland, and Russia, he says, that's to the north. He says, if anything, you should face, if anything, he says, we are toward the northwest of Eretz Yisrael, so we should face southeast, he says. But the minhag, he says, the minhag, nevertheless, is most people still face east. Most people don't start figuring out where Eretz Yisrael is, whatever country they're in. They just face due east. Aruch HaShulchan tries to find, again, justification for the minhag of why we do that. But again, there are different opinions as to whether you really should try to face earlier Achronim implied that you really should figure out where Eretz Yisrael is and face Eretz Yisrael, but the minhag often is to face east. But some people discuss whether you should face east along a line of latitude, like you would see on a map, or east along a great circle route, which is the mathematical shortest distance, or the way the airplanes fly, because it's shorter. So Rabbi Michael Broid says, and the main base medrash at Yeshiva University says, it actually does not face east. It faces more northeast because that is toward Eretz Yisrael. That's the great circle route toward Eretz Yisrael, and there's an argument to be made that you should really face that direction. The Gemara talks about what to do if a person has to daven really early and it's not Zman Kriya Shema yet. Is it better to daven early? Is it better to daven early and not do Gula Tefillah, because Kriya Shema will come later, so you won't be Samach Gula Tefillah? Or if he waits till later, he'll be traveling, he won't be able to stand when he davens Shemona Esrei, which is more important. We paskin b'shas chak. If you have to daven early, you can daven from Moed HaShachar, not earlier. Rashi seems to imply maybe even earlier than Moed HaShachar, but l'chal hapach is from Moed HaShachar, you can daven, and Kriya Shema later. It's better to do that and stand. It's better to do that and stand for Shemona Esrei than to do Gula Tefillah but not be able to stand during Shemona Esrei. The Gemara brings a story that Rav Yanai once davened twice. The Gemara has different interpretations of why he davened twice. The Gemara is having a whole discussion about whether Musaf needs a minyan or not, the Chever Ir. We paskin Musaf does not need a Chever Ir, but the Gemara brings a story of Rav Yanai davening twice. Some say it was Musaf, but the Gemara has another pshat on the story at one point that maybe he davened twice because he wasn't mechaven the first time, which seems to imply that if you're not mechaven when you daven Shemona Esrei, you need to daven again. That is how the Shulchan Aruch paskins initially. He says that if a person was not mechaven, we'll see later in the Gemara that the Iker Kavana, the most important Kavana, the crucial kavana is in Avos, is in the first bracha. If you didn't have kavana even for Avos, so then the Shulchan Aruch says you daven again. Ramah says we don't do that because we don't have so much kavana anyway, because even the second time around you probably won't have kavana, so why do Shemona Esrei again? So you don't daven again. We don't do this, we don't daven again even if we didn't have kavana. But the Mishmur brings from the Chai Adam that since Minat Din you really should daven again. If a person realizes still in the middle of the first bracha before he said Baruch Atah Hashem, the person should go back from Elokei Avram. You shouldn't say the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem again, but you should go back and repeat the body of the text of the first bracha if you realize you didn't have kavanah before you finished the concluding bracha. The Gemara says, even though we said earlier that Yalav Yavo, if you don't say Yalav Yavo, you have to daven Shemona Esrei again or go back to Ritzei. Marav, you don't have to because Ein Mekadshon is the Chodesh El Bayom. Kiddush HaChodesh only occurs during the day. So Marav Yalav Yavo is now Ma'akev. This is true even on the second day of Rosh Chodesh. Mishabur explains because it's only Seked Yom, it's like the first day, so Marav on either day, you don't have to go back if you missed the Yalav Yavo either day. The Gemara says, Laman Aleph, again, the Mishnah starts in Laman Amud Beis, it talks about Ein Omdin L'Spal, a person should only daven mitoch Kovid Rosh. The Gemara explains the flip side of that a person shouldn't have atzvos, he shouldn't daven while he's depressed, or atzlus, or laziness, or schok, or levity, and lightheadedness, sicha, chatting in a light and frivolous way, kalas rosh, levity, dvarim b'telim. A person should only begin davening mitoch simcha shel mitzvah, the way it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. A person should have ema v'hachna, should have awe and fear and submission to Hashem, certainly not schok and kalas rosh and dvarim b'telim. A person shouldn't be angry, he should have simcha, he should go into davening, we should go into Shemona Esrei with divrei tanchum shel Torah. Rashi gives us examples of this, of Torah, like Yetzias Mitzrayim, Gulas Mitzrayim, or like Til LaDavid, that we say Ritzoni Rav Yaseh. Torah ideas about how Hashem is good to us, and Hashem saves us, and Hashem behaves so benevolently toward us. That's the proper precursor to davening. That's how you should daven. The Gemara says Rabbi Kiva, when he would be mispal with the tzibur, he would be mekatzer va'ola. He wouldn't daven very long. He would make sure to keep his Shemona Esrei brief, because tarach hatzibur, what we call tercha de tzibura, not to burden the congregation. Shibur brings from the Yam Shel Shlomo that even on Shabbos v'Yom Tov, if the tzibur is not happy with you, the shliach tzibur shouldn't daven, even though people have more time, they're not working, I guess, but still you shouldn't daven excessively long, even on Shabbos v'Yom Tov, and even with the tzibur's permission, even if the kahal is okay with you, still too long is not appropriate, because Shabbos is supposed to be chetziv l'Hashem, v'chetziv l'Hashem, chetziv l'Hashem, v'chetziv l'Chem, serving Hashem and indulging your own appetites. Just having long davenings, he says, is neither, and even if the tzibur is okay, that is not entirely appropriate. The Gemara says that you can ask whatever you want. You can have arbitrary requests during Shema Tefillah, but also, besides that, you can say after Shema Esrei whatever you want. Even like the Seder of Yom Kippur, the long vidui, the long davening we say after Yom Kippur. You can say that too after Shema Esrei. The Shulchan Aruch says before Yula Ratzon, after Yula Ratzon, either one is fine. B'lashon Yachid, B'lashon Rabin. We'll see later in Shema Esrei. In certain points, you only say Lashon Rabin, but here you can say whatever you want. Your own tzrachim of the rabbim, lashon yachid, lashon rabbim, the language of yachid. You can do whatever you want. The Shulchan Aruch does bring elsewhere, though, that you really shouldn't say taknunim before Yula Ratzon. Ideally, a person should say Yula Ratzon first and then say taknunim. But we discussed earlier whether the minhag is to say Yula Ratzon after Elokai Netzar, before Elokai Netzar. But certainly, if you're adding taknunim, the Shulchan Aruch brings that you really should say it after Yula Ratzon. You can say Yula Ratzon twice if you want. He says, but you should say Yula Ratzon before taknunim. Again, Mishabur explains Medina, you can say the Bakashas even before Yula Ratzon, but the L'chatchila, the preferred way, according to the Shulchan Aruch, the preferred way is to first say Yula Ratzon, then Elokai Netzar, and any Tachnunim that you want to say. Gemara talks about the Tefillah of Chana. We learn many halachas of Tefillah, other halachas of Tefillah from Chana. We learn that you have to have Kavanah. We have other sources the Gemara brings to that. That's one of the sources, Medaberes Aliba. We learn that you have to utter the words, not just think them. It says her lips were moving, Svasea knows. It says, Kol lo yishama, that her voice was not heard. You're not allowed to speak loudly during Shemona Esrei. Although, as we saw, the Iker La'alacha, the Shulchan Aruch says that you should say loud enough to hear yourself. Eli thought she was drunk, and he was critical of her. We see from that a shikar is not allowed to daven. Shikar is not allowed to daven Shemona Esrei. He reprimanded her, and we see from that if a person sees someone doing something wrong, he shouldn't just say, "Not my business." He should reprimand the person. What does it mean someone who's drunk can't daven? L'chatchila, we say even revi'is yayin, a simple revi'is, a few ounces of wine, you shouldn't daven until the wine has worn off. If you've drunk more than that, then it depends. If you can still be Omed L'fnei HaMelech, if you can still speak passively, acceptably before a king, then b'di'ever at least the tefillah is good. If you can't speak before the king, even if you're not totally drunk, then tefillah is to'eva, you have to daven again. Mishabur says it applies not just to wine, to other beverages also. Liquor and beer and so on, anything that makes you drunk, even a revi'is or the equivalent in other drinks, might be less, he says, the amount that's equivalent to a revi'is of wine, you shouldn't daven l'chatchila Shemona Esrei. Even if you're going to miss man tefillah, you shouldn't daven. The Mishmur brings from the Pri Chadash, it's so important not to daven while you're intoxicated, even if you're going to miss man tefillah, it's too bad. But the Evid, if you can be a shogya, you can daven tashlumin, but l'chatchila you shouldn't daven. Marshal says, B'zman hazeh, again, we don't have so much kavanah, as we said earlier, so B'zman hazeh, you shouldn't miss man tefillah if you're at least only a little bit drunk. So, l'chalapachas, to miss man tefillah, when you're not that drunk, you can do it, because we don't have so much kavanah to begin with. The Gemara goes on and says that ani ha'isha anitzeva simcha bazeh. We say you're not allowed to sit. We see from there you're not allowed to sit within 4 amos of someone who's davening. We paskin you're not allowed to sit in front, on the sides, in front, and back, anywhere. You have to be 4 amos away, unless you're davening. If you're davening also, even if it's just ezu makama, the relatively minor parts of davening, then it's okay. The concern here, the post can explain, is people will say he's davening and you're not. You don't want to accept malchus shamayim. But if you're davening also, people won't say that. Some say Torah. Also, if you're learning Torah, you're not davening, you're learning Torah, that's okay too. Only if you're speaking Torah. If you're thinking Torah, the Mishabura said, nobody's going to know what you're doing. So again, they're going to think you're not being Makal Malchus Shamayim. But the Achronim say it's better not to be somech on the heter of Torah, that unless you're actually davening, you shouldn't be so lenient. Mishabura says the Achronim say you should be machmer like that, unless it's a makom adchak, that's difficult to do otherwise. Lachra, if you're behind him, it's not as bad, you can be more lenient. Lachrav nearly shein lahachmer, he says. Some say that in front of him you really shouldn't sit at all, even more than Daled Amos, even if you're saying Kriya Shema, you shouldn't sit at all because this is a new concern. Besides the fact that it does look, not just that it looks like you're not Makabel al Hashemayim, because that people will think he's bowing down to you. If you're sitting in front of him and he's saying Shemona Esrei and bowing down, it looks like he's bowing down to you. So if you're standing, that's not a concern. And even within Dalam, it's not a concern because it doesn't look like he's bowing down to you. If you're not sitting like a king, if you're standing up, people won't think he's bowing down to you. Some say no, that within Dalat Amos, that you really think that you really shouldn't do that because it can just disturb his kavanah and it's hard for him to concentrate. The Gemara says on Daf Lamed Beis, the Gemara says a Kohen who murdered, a Kohen who killed somebody, can't duchen because it says Yedechem Damim Mileyu, that a person who killed should not be Nosei Kapayim, should not do the mitzvah of Nesias Kapayim. We paskin even b'shogeg, even if the murder was an accident, it was manslaughter, he still shouldn't do it. And we paskin, the Shulchan Aruch paskins also, even if he did tshuva, still, even though tshuva is mechaperet, tshuva always atones, there's a principle of enka teger, nasis, and eger. These hands that killed, even though now he did tshuva, these hands cannot be nosei kapayim. Some say, the Ramah says that if he did tshuva, even if it was amazed, we do allow him to. The Ramah says we should be mekel because we want to encourage tshuva. Shalom delas b'fneim, so the minhag is to be mekel if he did tshuva. But the Mishnah Berurah brings, some achronim say that if the sin was mazed, if the murder was deliberate murder, then some achronim say we should be machmer. Even the mighty power of tshuva is not enough. We should still not let this kohen be nosei kapayim. The Gemara talks about the idea of waiting an hour before davening, before Shemona Esrei, and after Shemona Esrei. Again, it started back in the Mishnah on Daf Lamed. Chassidim Harishonim would wait an hour before they davened to focus their kavanah. The Gemara here brings also that people would wait an hour after his tefillah. Shulchan Aruch brings these halachos. Shulchan Aruch doesn't even say chassid. Shulchan Aruch just says a person should wait an hour before he davens to focus his kavanah. An hour after he davens to avoid giving the impression tefillah is a burden and he wants to run right out. Mishnah Berurah brings from Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah that on the one hand this is a real hour. It doesn't mean a small amount of time. It means a real hour, 1/12 of the day. However, that's only Chassidim. This is for Chassidim. For Shar Ha'am, we're not so strict. Shar Ha'am just have to wait a brief period of time, the time it takes to walk 4 Tvachim. But Chassidim waited the hour, and the minhag indeed is most people don't wait a full hour necessarily before davening or a full hour after davening. The halacha is that we had earlier in the Masechta, we learned about being mafsik during Birchas Kriya Shema, Bein HaPrakim, B'emtza Perek, between chapters. During the chapter, Shemona Esrei is very strict. We're very strict about Shemona Esrei. You cannot be mafsik, even Melech Yisrael. The Gemara talked about covered in Yira. A Melech Yisrael, a Jewish king, is someone who's supposed to have both respect and fear. Nevertheless, you cannot interrupt even for a Melech Yisrael. Even if he speaks to you, you cannot answer him. The one exception is Melech, who's not a Jew. We're afraid he might kill you. The Mishnah Berurah says anyone who's afraid he might kill you, whether he's a Melech or not a Melech, a Jew or not a Jew, someone who there's a concern may kill you, then you have to interrupt. Still, if it's better to avoid interrupting, ideally, if you can be makatzer, if you can just say if you can abbreviate Shemona Esrei, say the beginning and end of each bracha, that's ideal. Or if you can just turn away from him without speaking is the worst. Anything you can do to avoid speaking is better. But if you have no choice, if you have to, he's right here, none of the other solutions work, then you can talk. But ordinarily, if the hefsek means you shouldn't do anything, you shouldn't speak, l'chatchila, if it's not a question of life and death, you really shouldn't even motion. You shouldn't gesticulate and try to imply things with your hands. Unless a child is crying, then you can try to calm him down by gestures, he says. Even that's not just because we care about the child. The language of the Mishnah Berurah is, it's because we want him to be quiet and not bother you. So for that, we're makil on allowing gestures. But you still shouldn't speak. If you can't quiet him down, you should just walk away from him a little bit till he'll stop bothering you. But speaking, you really shouldn't do even in such a case. Even hefs and mammon, even if you're going to lose money, you should not interrupt Shemona Esrei. It's not a good enough reason to interrupt Shemona Esrei. The Gemara gives other examples of different types of danger. If you're on the road and you're going to be run down by an animal or a wagon, again, better not to be mafsik, better not to talk. You should leave the road. But ordinarily you shouldn't talk or leave. In middle of Shemona Esrei, you shouldn't move away from where you're standing. Again, unless you're in the tachnunim after tefillah, unless you're in the middle of a l'kai nitzar or the other tachnunim after davening, then you can move. The Gemara says in Daf Lamed Gimel that the Mishnah gave the example back in the Mishnah that even if there's a snake curled on your foot, you shouldn't interrupt Shemona Esrei. It's not that dangerous. But an akrav, a scorpion, is dangerous, and the Gemara discusses what types of things are dangerous. The Shulchan Aruch paskins even a snake is dangerous. If you see the snake is angry and is hostile and is belligerent and threatening, maybe it's rattling, whatever it is, then you should even a snake. And the Gemara gives different examples of an ox, a shartam, a sharmua, different types of oxen. Generally, I think the rule is that hakol l'fe'ainian, if it's dangerous, then certainly you're mafsik. If it's not dangerous, you shouldn't be mafsik in middle of Shemona Esrei. The Gemara says that if a person makes a bracha she'eina tzricha, which in this context, in many contexts, means bracha levatala, a person makes a bracha which is unnecessary and therefore a bracha in vain, you took Hashem's name in vain, you said it in the form of a bracha, it's very bad. Shulchan Aruch brings language of the Rambam. It's like taking God's name in vain. No say Shem Shemayim Lashav. That's one of the Ten Commandments. L'sisa Shem Hashem L'kech Lashav. It's like you're Nishbal Lashav. It's like you swore in vain or falsely in Hashem's name. You're not allowed to say Amen after that bracha. Some understand the Rambam to mean that a bracha levatala is actually a daraisa, even though most brachas are not daraisa, except for brachas Torah and brachas Hamazon. Most brachas are not daraisa, but a bracha levatala is navera daraisa. Others say it's not what the Rambam means. The Rambam says kin nishbal hashav. It's like your nishbal hashav. It's not really shvu hashav. Other Rishonim say clearly it's only drabanan. It's a major machlokes whether bracha levatala is daraisa or drabanan. The Gemara talks about if a person forgot to say Havdalah in Chanin Hadas, forgot to say Atachon Antanu, you don't go back because you will say it later Halachos. Later you'll make Havdalah at home with a kos. The Gemara says Ta bazu bazu. If he made an error in both of them, Chozer l'rosh. What does it mean an error in both of them? We paskin that means if he forgot Havdalah and Shemona Esrei and then he also ate before Havdalah, even though normally if you eat before Havdalah, you just go and make Havdalah anyway. You weren't supposed to eat, but you still make Havdalah. But if you both forgot Havdalah and Shemona Esrei and you ate before Havdalah, then we require you to say Shemona Esrei again. It's a knas for making this error, making this dual error, and making the mistake twice. We say you do Shemona Esrei again. If you're not going to have a kos at night, and you don't expect to have a kos the next day either on Sunday, then you do have to go back and say Shemona Esrei. The only reason you don't go back and say Shemona Esrei for Havdalah is because of the kos. If you're not going to have a kos Motzei Shabbos or Sunday, then you go back and say Shemona Esrei again. The Gemara says saying Shema, saying various things is a problem. Saying Modim twice is a problem. Saying Shema twice is like saying Modim. So the other things are not so common to say. Modim twice. Other example, Shema actually is a major issue. The Gemara says Shulchan Aruch we paskin that whether you say the word Shema twice, the pasuk Shema twice, that's a problem because it looks like you're Mekabel Shtei Rishuyos. Looks like you have two gods. So the Mishmur does say that if a person wasn't mechavein, if he didn't have kavanah the first time, then you do need to say Shema again. So ideally, if you're in public, you should say the second time quietly, so nobody should think you're saying Shema twice. But if nobody's around, if you're in private, you can say Shema the second time even out loud. However, if you are mechavein, you shouldn't say Shema twice even quietly. The Mishmur, the Shulchan Aruch, the Mishmur bring various cases of other things. In certain cases, people did say Shema twice in certain parts of the liturgy. And even today, we don't really say Shema twice. We say them at different parts of davening. If there's a break in between, it's not a problem. Mishmur brings. We say Hashem Hu Elokim and Baruch Shem Kvod Melchuso multiple times, Matzi Yom Kippur and other times. That's not a problem. As long as Shema we're only saying once, Hashem Hu Elokim has precedence in Tanakh, and Baruch Shem Kvod Melchuso. As long as Shema you're only saying once, even if Baruch Shem is multiple times, that apparently doesn't seem like a person has Shtei Rishuyos, so that we're not so worried about. The Gemara says that if the Chazan should not say Amen when the Kohanim say Brachas Kohanim, Yivrach Hashem Yishmerecha and Pnei Tiruf, he might get mixed up and forget he's reading Yair Hashem. He'll forget where he's up to. He might get it wrong, so he shouldn't do that because he might get confused. Mishnah Berurah brings that we have Siddurim today. If you have a Siddur, then and you're pretty sure that you know what you're up to, you're going to keep track of what you're up to, then you're allowed to say Amen. It's not actually a hefsek. Since it's part of Brachas Kohanim, Amen to Brachas Kohanim, it's not a hefsek. So then you can say Amen. However, the Amen after the bracha of Brachas Kohanim, the bracha of L'varech es Amar Yisrael b'Ahava, so that bracha, some poskim say it is, some poskim say it is a hefsek, and even if you have a siddur, you shouldn't say Amen after that bracha. Some say you shouldn't do that. The Mishnah goes on and says if there's no Kohen but the Shliach Tzibur, then he still shouldn't duchen because we're afraid he'll get confused, he'll be tarad, he'll get mixed up. But if he's sure that he's not going to get mixed up, and we paskin he's the only Kohen, so if you're the only Kohen, and otherwise there'll be no Brachas Kohanim, and you're sure you're not going to get mixed up, then the Kohen who is davening as a Shliach Tzibur does duchen. And again, Mishmur brings, we have Siddurim, so we're not worried about getting mixed up. So then, if you're the only Kohen, then you duchen. If you're not the only Kohen, then you still shouldn't duchen. Let other Kohanim duchen, even if you have the Siddur. The Gemara says that a person shouldn't say tzracha, a person shouldn't ask for his personal needs in the first three brachas and the last three brachas, only in the middle brachas, like we ask for cholim and rafa'enu and shema koleinu, and we ask for things. But in the first three and the last three brachas, you can't do that. Tosas brings, B'Shem the Rach and Rav Haigon, that's only personal tzrachim for a yachid, but for rabbim, for communal needs, that we say even in the first and last three brachas. That's why we say Zachreinu on Yom Naraim, and on Teres Metshuva we say Zachreinu, which is a request. We say Krovitz, we say different types of piyutim. Yalav Yavo we ask for, which is also a request. We ask for those things in the brachos because this only applies to personal tzrachim, not to communal ones. The Gemara says that you bow down the beginning and end of the first bracha of Avos, the beginning and end of Modim, the bracha of Hodah. You cannot bow down at the end of any other bracha. We teach you not to do that. The Shulchan Aruch says, but in the middle of other brachos you're allowed to. There is one sheet that says not, but with the Shulchan Aruch, the Ikar Halacha is that you're allowed to bow down in the middle of any arbitrary bracha. The Gemara says that Abaye and Rava would be matzle atzluye. The Gemara talks about different types of prostrating yourself. Kida and Shtachavaya. It says Abaye and Rava would matzle atzluye. They would lean. Rashi and Tosafos say it means they wouldn't do a full prostration, but they would lean on their sides. This is what we refer to as tachnun and nefilas apayim. Shulchan Aruch says that when we do nefilas apayim, you lean on your left. Some say you lean on your right arm. The Ramah brings the minhag is that when you're wearing tefillin, because of respect for the tefillin, so during chakras, the person who's wearing tefillin leans on his right. Other times, Mariv, Mincha, times that a person does not have tefillin, then you lean on your left hand. That's the general custom. The Gemara says ideally a person should have kavana for all the brachas of Shemona Esrei. If he can't, he should at the very least have kavana for the bracha of Avos. You should have one bracha, the bracha of Avos. The Gemara says it doesn't say anything about b'diavad. You have the earlier Gemara we read. The Gemara says that someone davened two Shemona Esreis. And the Gemara proposes, at least at one stage, was because he didn't have kavana. So the way the Shulchan Aruch brings it is that he didn't have kavana, meaning in the first bracha, the Gemara here says that having kavana in one bracha in Avos is b'diavad at least acceptable. But the earlier Gemara that said if you don't have kavana, you daven again. That means if you didn't have kavana during Avos, then even b'diavad you're not yotzi. Again, we said the minhag is not like that. The minhag is that once you finish the first bracha, you don't go back because you're not going to finish the second time anyway. But if you're still in the middle of the first bracha before Baruch Atah Hashem, Magen Avraham, then you go back and the Mishmur brings from the Chayad, and then you do go back and recite the body text of the first bracha again.